the fuel costs will be negligible for fusion, but the engineering complexity, materials requirements, likely high replacement rate of neutron damaged components mean that the construction costs and the non-fuel operation and maintenance will probably more than offset that advantage. There may be very clever approaches to fusion still to be discovered for which that won't be true, but based on current designs, it's not likely to cost much less than fission, if less at all. In terms of accidents and sabotage, it is still possible to get significant radioactivity releases with fusion, partly from tritium and partly in some cases from neutron-activated materials. But very large releases are less likely by accident and harder to cause by sabotage because the volatile radioactivity is much smaller. The fusion radioactive afterheat is smaller, and a runaway reaction is highly improbable. That has led to calculations, some of which I and Mujib Kazemi, who's here, were involved in the late 80s and early 90s, suggesting that the worst possible accident from a deuterium-tritium fusion reactor would be 2 to 100 times, and I tend to lean toward the 100 in terms of the kinds of reactors we'd actually be likely to deploy, smaller than for a fission reactor of the same size. I mean, clearly the quest to control fusion has attracted a lot of effort and quite a lot of money because of the enormous fuel supply. The likelihood that fusion reactors will be safer, will generate less troublesome radioactive waste, easier to safeguard than fission for a whole variety of reasons. Above all, in a normally operating fusion power plant, there wouldn't be any fissile material at all. It would have to be substantially modified to produce any. And of course, part of the attraction is the science and technology involved are fascinating. But the technical challenges of getting there remain very large. We've invested more than $20 billion in fusion R&D worldwide to date. It's likely that at least another 30 to 40 billion and 30 to 40 more years will be needed before fusion is able to contribute to electricity supply, and we're not certain it will then. The challenges are very large. We have made a lot of progress. If you look at the progress in fusion power from the early 70s to the mid-90s, the rate of improvement actually exceeded Moore's law, generally applied to semiconductors. Unfortunately, the absolute level of achievement at the end of that period was still below what is needed for energy break even. The best performance of the JET, the Joint European Tokamak, the current world record holder, was it very briefly was able to generate about 2/3 of what had to be supplied to it to heat and maintain the plasma. So still a loser. ITER, the next generation, shown in this ancient diagram from a PCAS study in 1995 as being available around 2010, is now not expected until 2018. So this curve gets even flatter in terms of the next level of performance. There's been a lot of progress, but we still have a ways to go. There's a good case for it, in my judgment. And the case is summarized here. We don't have that many long-term alternatives. I was talking about what we have to do by 2050. You have to ask yourself, what are we going to do for an encore after 2050? It would be very nice to have fusion in that mix. And given its potential advantages over other alternatives, summarized here, I think it's worth the money. My personal judgment is that we should be investing the money. And we are continuing to do it in the United States and in other countries, but it remains controversial. And it's hard to justify as much as fusion costs and will cost when all we're spending on all energy R&D together is 5 to 8 times as much as we need to be spending on fusion, when fusion's probably not going to generate a commercial kilowatt hour until 2050 or later. The solution to that, in my view, is not to stop research on fusion, it's to ramp up the amount of energy we're spending on, the amount of money we're spending on energy R&D altogether. And again, that's what a new PCAST report, which Ernie Moniz has co-chaired, will shortly be out recommending. It's what the odd couple of the American Enterprise Institute and the Brookings Institution just recommended. It's what PCAST recommended in the Clinton administration. It's what President Obama said he wanted to do during the campaign and has said since, $15 billion a year rather than $4 billion a year on energy technology R&D. If we did that, we could afford to find out whether we can make fusion work and do the other things that we need to do as well. And I think that's where we should be going. Thank you very much.